being here. Just to let you know a little bit about what's going to happen, we're going to chat for about half an hour, and then we'll open it up to questions from you all for 15 or 20 minutes. Then, as I think you know, we will escort anybody who likes to see, who's interested in seeing the place. We'll go downstairs and show you where we teach our classes and introduce you to our new space that we're very happy with. After that, you're welcome to stick around for your choice of experiencing a little bit of what we do here at the Theater Lab by having an improv class with Amal Sadeh, which will be really fun, and no experience necessary, nothing hard about it or scary. Hope you'll consider doing that. Or you can come to another space which you'll be directed to where you can see 5 of our wonderful teens singing musical theater songs. So I hope you'll join us for all of that.
Great, and usually we're sort of hosting these events, but tonight we're not so much hosting because we are being interviewed. So we have a very special guest who's here to do the interviewing, and she's so famous that I have to take out this scroll to remember all of the things that she's done here. Tonight's special guest is a New York Times opinion writer, and I think the undisputed queen of the podcast. She's got the Times podcast Sway and Pivot from New York Magazine, and they're both amazing. She's a regular contributor on MSNBC. Some of you may have first encountered her as the genius tech reporter at the Wall Street Journal, where, along with Walt Mossberg, she founded All Things Digital, the D Conference, and later Recode. We're talking tech now. Those of you who go way, way back machine in Washington may remember that she was a business reporter for Washington City Paper and the Washington Post. Okay, shout out for City Paper. You know you want to. Shout out for the Washington Post. You know you want to. She also wrote the very dear to our hearts Backstage column way back when, and so it's kind of like the DC theater community's very own Page 6. It was salacious. Her recent podcast interviews include Maggie Gyllenhaal, Anita Hill, and Jon Stewart, who she's going to be talking with tomorrow night as well. Her all-time interview list includes Hillary Clinton, Mark Zuckerberg, President Barack Obama, and a million others. And I know what you're thinking. And I talked to her in the dressing room, and yes, she is nervous to be interviewing the co-directors of the Theater Lab tonight, but she is working through it. So now, it is our pleasure to welcome to this stage the inimitable Kara Swisher.
Ask if I'm nervous to be interviewed by her.
Yeah, I don't think you have that many. But I hope you guys have really good questions. But I will try my best to try to elicit some sort of interesting bits of information from you, if it's possible.
May not be.
I apologize. I have a bit of a cold. Deb didn't know I had more children than I had. I have 4 children, and 2 of them are very young, and so the toddler brought home from school, not COVID, thankfully, but a cold, the regular plain old cold. And everybody in the house has it. It finally got to me today. So anyway, I apologize for if I cough or anything like
They're
that.
all masked.
Yeah, okay, good. But it's not COVID. My wife Amanda was going to an event, and she's got a really bad cough, and so all she's going to do all night is go, not COVID, not COVID. So anyway, so let's talk about the Theater Lab. So this is your new talk about a little bit. This is your 30th anniversary, correct? Yes. So I'd love to get a sense of, I remember we were that old, when you started it. Can you guys each talk a little bit about what you were thinking when you started? Because it was sort of haphazard, as I recall. It was a great idea. Go ahead.
Okay.
Why don't you start?
All right. Well, we went to graduate school together to get our MFAs in acting at Catholic University. And yay, Catholic University. And we finished in 1992, and we were best friends. And we decided, well, let's do something. together. And Deb had this great idea to start a little business that would, where we would coach people for auditions,
Right.
particularly maybe graduate school auditions. And I had done a lot of teaching and loved the idea of teaching, and suddenly that became an opportunity. And Deb's mother happened to have who is here, Roberta, owned a publishing company in Alexandria, and she said, well, you can use my space. And so we went there to teach our classes in the publishing company. And it was just the two of us at the time, and then we gradually brought on more teachers, our friends, to do that, and we had no idea what it was going to turn into. So it was haphazard.
You started, and you were in lots of different locations, correct, before you?
Yes, we were at some of you go way back. We were at DCAC, we were at the Wesley United Methodist Church uptown in Chevy Chase, we were in Piccolo Press offices, we were running out of my bedroom, not teaching the classes, but like the
Yeah.
but yeah, actually the thing that Buzz didn't say about that first class, I have a very specific memory that it is sort of about the haphazardness. The first class had 5 students and 2 teachers. And, we were just like, oh my God, people showed up. And we taught. And we were so excited that then we went out after with people like paid in cash. We were not a nonprofit then. We hadn't registered with anything. And we went down the street to Casablanca restaurant and spent the whole thing on
It was not a $500 dinner, but yes.
Since then, we've learned a lot, but it's interesting because we really started out thinking, what are we going to do with our MFA acting degrees? We were
Right.
both working as actors at the time.
Right, and
so-
lots of productions, both of you. I've seen you in a zillion productions.
Yeah, both mostly at Signature.
Yeah.
Me at Woolly Mammoth a lot in the old days. And,
Mhm.
but I think that what we discovered pretty early on was that A, we loved doing it, but B, that so many people were coming to take our classes not because they wanted to necessarily become professional actors,
Right.
although there's nothing wrong with that, but because they wanted to develop the real life, benefits that you get from that, about feeling confident on stage. I'm not afraid of her. And
Not yet.
yeah, right.
This is the easy question.
I have a lot of previous information about
Yeah.
Deb's former life. We'll get to that.
But and then it was sort of like that idea became really fascinating to us, that this stuff is really powerful. It connects us to parts of ourselves that we didn't know we had. It connects us to each other. It connects us to people that we never would have been in the same room with. And then we, in about the year 2000, we started to feel like, if this is so powerful and so life-changing in so many ways, why are we limiting it to the people who already have the means to seek us
Like
out?
lawyers or whoever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we started, every hand in the audience goes up. But we started our Life Stories program, so we specifically worked with people whose voices are not traditionally heard in our society, to help teach them some of these skills to be able to
Which
make
turned you
original
into a nonprofit,
dramatic
correct?
work.
Right.
Yeah, we were a nonprofit theater school right after the Casablanca incident. We incorporated in 1993, but then our mission really became a community mission in
Which
a real
shifted
sense.
at the
Yeah.
turn of the century. So those are all fantastic talking points. But can you sort of give me an idea of the difficulty of starting a business in terms of what were the struggles you had while you were creating it? 'Cause I remember there was some ups and downs.
You should tell us.
What?
What do you remember?
No, but it was like, what are we? I recall having a discussion with Deb. She might have been drunk. I don't recall. I don't drink myself. But talk about sort of what you were trying to get to. Because
Well-
obviously trying to reach a lot of people and do good in the world is often not very profitable. It's very difficult to do that. So what were you trying to focus in on?
Well, the way I remember it, I think that at first we thought we were going to teach a few classes and see what happens.
Yeah.
Haphazard.
Right.
But it became not as haphazard when we realized that we were able, we thought that we were able to fill a gap in the Washington theater education space, because the way we perceived it, there were places we could go to just have fun and do improv, and
Right.
it didn't matter if you came or not. And then there were places that were extremely rigorous and made you cry and failed you if you didn't do well enough. And, and I'm not naming any names. And we thought that there was a big space in between that sort of matched who we were and what we wanted to do, which was to teach rigorous acting training and have it be fun and welcoming and nurturing as well.
Right.
And so that was how we approached it. So we discovered that we had this place in Washington. We should get incorporated and see what it turns into. And the difficulties that we encountered were in the business area at first, and that's why we brought on our friend Michael Rogers to essentially co-found, yay, Michael Rogers, essentially co-found the business with us, and he was the one who really got it through the whole process of becoming a 501c3, et cetera.
So Deb, what do you think the most important thing you do is, actually? If you had to, you do like classes that are fun for, I wasn't making fun of lawyers in particular, although that's particularly easy to do. But what do you think your purpose is in terms of the most important clients you have?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question. I was so ready to talk about all the down things, all
go
the
ahead.
dirty secrets, but now I'll go to this higher calling. I think for a long time we felt that we sort of had this split identity
Yeah.
between being a serious theater school and being a community organization. And I think that what we have learned over the past decade is that there's nothing split about it. What we do is what theater does, which is to connect us to our own humanity and to each other, and to teach us about empathy. I mean, it's just baked into theater. What we learn in acting school is that nothing human is alien to me. And so I guess every class we teach, that is one of the fundamental principles, is let me see who you are, where you are. And we had a great acting teacher in graduate school, Bill Graham, who used to say that he believed that we all had all 88 keys of the piano inside of us, but most of us only played ourselves in one octave. And acting was the search for the other 80 keys. And I love that so much. And so I feel like a lot of what we're doing in any classroom is searching for the other 80 keys with each other and like learning how to play this beautiful, symphony together. So that being said, my passion right now is on taking all of that and working with people who have become in some way disconnected, disenfranchised, particularly coming out of the pandemic. So this is where our Life Stories work really has focused. We work with returning citizens, we work with formerly homeless women in substance recovery, we work with LGBTQ children and adults, we work with teen mothers, a lot of people who are simply not getting from societal institutions the opportunity to talk about all of who they are. It's like it's so narrow the way that we are, defining people sometimes because we met them in this institution, or we actually, the Life Stories program started for seniors in an assisted living facility, and in that little narrow window, it's like, oh, well, what medication do you need today versus what are all the amazing things that you've done in your life?
So you put on two things. One is the pandemic, which I'd like to talk about the impact, because it's had an impact on everybody. And then disconnection, because I think it's what I write about all the time, is the twitchy, reductive nature of our communications now, which has only been stressed by the pandemic, right? I wrote a column in the Times at the beginning of the pandemic, and I said, guess who's going to get rich in this thing? The people that reduce us and bring us in a virtual world. And so talk a little bit about the impact of your business on the pandemic, because I had so many friends whose small businesses just got decimated during it because they were either analog, like a caterer or something like that, or they had jobs that were very hard to recover in that regard. So talk about, because you made this transition, but I suspect it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah, well, if you're a theater It was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You know, theater was hit really badly. We were not hit as badly because we could switch to virtual world. And surprising, well, it's not surprising because we have really fantastic teachers who were really able to make that switch. And a lot of people thought, well, you can't teach acting online. It just can't be done. But it really can. Well, almost all of our classes made the switch very successfully for the students who were in there. So it was actually right smack in the middle of one of our 6-week sessions that we had to shut down. And so we gave everybody the opportunity to get their money back or stay online. And the ones who stayed ended up being satisfied, happy with how it went. And then we continued working with people who were willing to come and take the online classes, and they went great. And I found out I could teach online, and I thought, well, wow, this is kind of amazing that this happens. Problem was we couldn't convince new people that that was going to be the case.
Right.
You know, so that was how we suffered in the pandemic, in bringing new people in, because it's hard to convince people that the online experience is going to be anything like what it is. But there are just little tricks that you learn. Like you can, in a meeting on Zoom, everybody is muted all the time. When I taught acting, everybody was not muted all the time. You know, and we didn't care if there was a barking dog. We wanted the feeling that we were all in a space together and could hear everything that was going on. And you can go and warm up together and feel like you're having a human connection. And I was surprised at how successful it was possible for those classes to be.
I think that, you know, some of our teachers were really fantastic at this and led the way, and we learned from them and our staff too. But I think one of the things that I discovered, because I was skeptical about what it would mean to really try to connect in 2D, and I think we learned that Zoom is just a room. You know, what you do in it is up to you. And so there was great fun to be had. I mean, it wasn't perfect fun,
Right.
but people were freaking lonely.
Yeah.
You know, and so having any fun was way better than having no fun. And so I think that started to give us confidence. I mean, we had more than 3,000 students in the first year of the pandemic. We offered a lot of classes, you know, free, pay what you can, to you know, just because we wanted people to be able to jump in, but also we wanted to test the concept and have people say, yeah, I'll come back. And they did. You know, we're glad to be in person now.
Yeah.
Although we probably keep a little piece of virtual.
Yeah, I think that is a big thing that we learned, is that we can have virtual classes. I mean, we found out that people from the disabled community were so happy that we were doing classes online, they didn't have to get downtown. And, you know, sad to say, I had never thought about that before. And so now we will definitely keep some of our classes online.
You can also expand outreach. I mean, one of the issues is, as a parent, online education just sucked. There's just no, and lots of things worked better. Delivery was worked well. All kinds of work was actually not that bad once people got used to it. Wasn't ideal, but it certainly is going to stay in place. So you would just imagine it'll be a small part, because a lot of workplaces, Zoom is now, you know, I'm trying to write a Zoom town is dead column kind of thing, but it's not the case. It's not
Right.
really the case,
Right.
even though the stock of that particular company has cratering. But when you,
I didn't know that.
I know, you kind of feel bad and yet you don't at the same time.
It's just a room.
Just a room. But when you think about what you're going to do to expand people beyond, like you said, the disabled, it never occurred to you. It never occurs to lots of people. And now that you have the ability to work from anywhere you want or participate from anywhere you want, do you see a benefit in that?
Oh, yeah, definitely, particularly with life stories. And what we do now with life stories, we also teach other people to teach life stories. In our Life Stories Institute every year, it's a 4-day thing where several of our great life stories teachers teach it with us, and some of the women that you may know from the documentary from N Street Village teach it with us. But we've been doing that a lot online as well, and that, you know, the geographical reach expands exponentially that way. And as part of a big strategic plan that we just wrote is to really try to expand the reach of that further. And we now have a class on Udemy that you can buy to learn these skills that other people taught us. We used to say, or I always used to say, it takes a very special person to do life stories. I could never do that. But then I started studying what these teachers did and discovered, well, you can learn how to do it. And so we're getting that out there so that people, you know, if you live in Phoenix and you know there's a organization there that works with young mothers or something, and you would like to get involved with that, you can come and just, spend $40 on Udemy and buy this course and then teach it there. We don't brand it as a life stories course, but it's those techniques.
What about from your perspective? Do you imagine that being a big part of your business? Or are you just like, I've had enough of this, I want to be in business?
I imagine it being a way to speed some things that can be sped up. So in the theater world, a table read, where just one of the first things that you do is you sit around a table with a script and people read it. There's really not a reason why you can't do that on Zoom. I'm not sure that I always want to, but you can see everybody. I mean, there's a certain equality to the size of everybody, in those things, although there's an inequality in terms of the technology. But so I could see some things, being like, okay, great, then we'll actually be able to get an extra week of rehearsal in if we started on Zoom, because there's no space here. Like, that I could see. But, I love the gathering. So I'm not sorry that we learned how to do all these things, and I think it will live on in some ways, but I'm most excited about, being able to do stuff like that. But I know, actually, I just kind of wanted to ask you a question. Is that allowed?
Sure.
Okay. No, I remember talking with you, and I've read some things that you've written about artificial intelligence and how it's going to take over pretty much every job in every field, except there's like one notable exception.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting because so many people are taught that this particular exception is a highly impractical thing to study ever.
Yeah.
But I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that.
Your creativity?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things, I'm working on a memoir right now, time covering, and I actually started here in Washington covering. AOL was the first company which was local, and a lot of this stuff was local. But one of the things I have at the beginning of that book is this idea that everything that can be digitized will be digitized, which was something that came to me right at the beginning of this, like everything. It's going to roll over everything, and it doesn't matter whether it was restaurants or newspapers or whatever, everything that could be digitized. And the one thing that's very difficult to digitize is creativity right now. Now, I don't say it can't be, but it certainly is not something that's as easy for not just AI, but machine learning and things like that. And so that anyone that's in a creative job is in a safer position than others. That said, sorry to tell you this next part, they're also, though, a creature of distribution. They're at the mercy of distribution. You can see it happening in Hollywood right now, where the economics are getting destroyed. These are very creative people. It's never been a better time to sell. There's so many, I don't know if there's, TV shows are coming out of everybody's ears, or movies and this and that. But it's, because it's streaming, it changes things. Therefore, movie theaters get affected. Same thing with theater. I think a lot of theater is very inaccessible to most people. And if you can get it online, why wouldn't you? Like, you could get it to many, many, many more people. You're seeing a war playing out right now that's an internet-enabled war in Ukraine. The information war is not as important as buildings being bombed, but it is in a lot of weird ways. And so I think the issue with creativity is that you have to imagine what can't be replaced by a computer. I'm using that in a broad way. And pretty much everything can. It's just that right now I don't know where theaters, I'd love to know from you guys, where do you think theater's going now? Because people have gotten into practices of streaming media and being at home and building their little nests, and they're used to it, and it has implications on the workplace and everything else. How do you imagine the implications on theaters? And I don't mean like live theater. I've already declared movie theaters nearly dead, to the chagrin of most of Hollywood, but it's actually exactly what's happening. So how do you imagine it returning, and what is special about that?
Well, a lot of people that I know, me included, got really sick of streaming live theater really early on.
Right, okay.
People saying yes to that. But your point about the
What made you sick
accessibility
about
of
it?
it,
I'm just-
well, because part of what we like about it is that being in the same room with the people, where you can feel the back and
Right.
forth of the bodies, and you can't have that.
That you
that I
got
think
sick
you
of
miss.
it. Do you know if consumers did?
Well, I'm only
Right.
saying, among people I know.
Right,
I don't know
okay.
anything
Right.
beyond that. But your point about the accessibility of theater, that has been a problem for a long time. That people cannot afford to go, most people cannot afford to go to the theater. And
Right.
so from that perspective, I would think that streaming is a great benefit. So, I don't know.
Yeah, because we're not a theater, it's always sort of hard to speak, in a super knowledgeable way. We do produce a lot of shows, they're all student shows. But I will say that there's something about the risk involved in somebody stepping out onto a live stage, a live body on a live stage in front of other live bodies. In that moment, it's never going to exist like that again. That there is something thrilling about that I know our students have really missed. And so I think it is probably irreplaceable, but I worry that it's going to be even more niche than it was.
Right,
For the
right,
very
right.
reasons that you and Buzz are talking about.
So when you think about that idea, because part of it is connection, you're talking about connection, and I think I wrote a column saying movie theater business is going to be small. It's already tiny compared to streaming and everything else. It's going to be smaller than ever, and they spent decades abusing customers with bad popcorn and high prices and parking, and they're like, the magic of the theater. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, abusive to consumers, and now they can sit in their home and do whatever they want. What do they need you for, essentially? But one of the things that's important is that you connect with people in the dark. I don't believe that's the case. You don't speak to anyone in a movie theater, but theater is a very different experience. Well, maybe some of you speak to movie theater. Please start putting that. But talk about the connection issue, because at the heart of your business is connection,
Yeah.
right? The idea of, again, like I said, we live in a reductive, twitchy world where connection is a Twitter dunk or a small thing on Facebook, and a lot of it is covered with hate. It's something I write about a lot for a long time. How do you talk about connection?
Yeah.
Because I think people have lost faith in institutions, churches, like things where they connected, and theater is a place where I know I got a lot of soul from watching live theater.
Yeah, I have so much to say about this. That I would say, first off, one of the things that one of our great life stories teachers taught us, the late, wonderful Orrin Sandel from Living Stages Company originally, was that theater is where your story meets my story and becomes our story. And in part because of this other thing, which is that we're never just telling a story to a blank slate. We're telling our story to your story, and you're receiving that story from your story. And so that is just like a very, very live and meaningful exchange, as I said, really built in. And now there's a really positive moment in theater, as other things about, thinking about, well, whose stories are getting told, who's getting to tell those stories. And that we need to really make sure that the stories that we're telling are representative of the communities that we're in. And so there's really some positive things about what theater can do connection-wise. But the piece about disconnection, I've seen it mostly play out in the schools. And we are dealing with just an absolute mental health crisis. Every teacher that you will talk to will tell you the same thing, that our students are traumatized by being sort of yanked out of the social fabric and not having developmentally gotten some of those skills that you would get from being a part of that social fabric, but especially students from Black and brown communities, under-resourced communities where the fabric was, very tender to begin with. And so, the first people who sort of got disenfranchised were the people who didn't have good Wi-Fi connection. Yes, people are delivering laptops and all of that, but if you can't get on Wi-Fi, you can't be in class. So Theater Lab is working really closely, and this is something that I'm super excited about, with 17 other arts education organizations, the 17 largest arts education organizations in town. A couple of them are theater organizations, but most of them are visual arts or music, And we all serve youth, and we are all engaged in trying to help reconnect youth who have, in some ways, fallen through the cracks or, not been getting the kind of soul nourishment that is needed. And for every one of these organizations, our students showed up during the pandemic, turned their cameras on, which is another big thing. It's one thing to be in the room, it's another thing to turn your camera on. And we work with wonderful organizations like Life Pieces to Masterpieces in Ward 7 and Sitar Arts Center in Ward 2. And together we are creating something called the Arts Institute for Creative Advancement. And the idea is to work with 16 to 24-year-olds who are disconnected from school and work and use the healing powers of the arts, sort of the socio-emotional connecting power of the arts, to form a cohort that ultimately gets trained in theater tech and music production. And it'll be a apprenticeship and workforce pipeline into DC's theater and event scene. I think some of you work in theater and you can back me up on this, that there is just an absolute labor shortage in the theater and production industry, and there are well-paying jobs and careers to be had, and everybody's having to look outside of DC in order to fill those needs. And then we have these young people who are full of talents that have been untapped. And so we're really excited. We're working to become the first city-sponsored arts apprenticeship program. Right now, the only all of the city-sponsored apprenticeship programs are in the building trades and a few in the hospitality trades, none in the arts. But we're very close to being able to launch. We're hoping to begin our pilot year in 2023.
That sounds amazing. But one of the things that I think you didn't answer was this idea of reductive. Like, kids have TikTok, Instagram, and this is how they connect. There's a huge amount of creativity. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit on these platforms. And there's a lot of stuff that impacts teens' self-esteem. That's been well documented. But what I always notice on these platforms is the amount of creativity that's sort of, I don't want to say vomited up, but it's crazy how creative, especially young people are. And a bunch of old guys, oddly enough, are quite good at dancing, better than I thought. And I'm an air fryer person, and so I just watch air fryer videos almost constantly. Although I do it on a burner phone, and all of you should if you're using TikTok, but that's another issue. But what, okay. Anyway, how do you compete with that when that's where expression is happening? It seems like if you spend even a small amount of time, Instagram is more performative in a weird way, and a lot of ridiculous makeup stuff going on, but that's still creative in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, and that's the connection which seems with these influencers, and then people follow them. How do you break people out of that, even though it's a creative space at the same time? I don't know, Buzz.
Deb?
I don't understand these technologies.
I would say that first of all, we don't say, get off my lawn, TikTok, in my day, we didn't have that, I mean, because that is a big turnoff to our teens. On the other hand, we do say, we're right here, let's connect right here and now. We had the opportunity during the pandemic, actually. I did a show that we rewrote with some of our teens. It was about a war scenario, kind of a post-apocalyptic thing, and they changed it to be a pandemic scenario. And then everybody just filmed it live on their cell phone outside. I mean, they were really creative. And so they got a lot of control back, and they were way better at that than I could have been as a director. So, part of it is understanding what cultural capital you already have there and how can we use that. Because, in the theater, there's great need for people who are scenic projectionists and all that kind of stuff. And those are the kinds of skills that those young people are developing. But we do say, put that down so that we can connect right now in class. I don't have a great answer, is my answer for you.
Yeah, I don't have any answer at all. You are surprisingly a very good interviewer, but now or soon we should start taking questions.
We will,
from the
absolutely.
audience.
Thank you for directing me. But
Yeah.
I don't appreciate it. But I do have one last question for you both. I'd like you to be honest, if you could.
We could start being honest.
What's been the hardest part of this 30 years, and what's been the most rewarding? You can flip them if you feel like.
I'll start.
Oh, good.
And you both have to answer.
The hardest
Buzz.
part has been buzz, and the most rewarding has been buzz. No, I would say that might be true. The hardest part has been finding balance. And this is what probably is the hardest part of everybody's life, and it's certainly when we work. We have a professional actor conservatory here too, so we have 10 students a year who are training for the professional stage, and we meet a lot. And figuring out, I still define myself as an actor, but I don't have a lot of time to act now. But I love what I do here, and I learned that I love to teach and to direct. I struggled when I had a young child, and I was trying to do all three. And so just sort of figuring out, because sometimes in this profession in particular, we were just talking to our students about this, some of our graduates from last year, about everything feels like it has to be right now. Like you're only as good as your last show, and people will forget about you, and what's the next creative idea? And I think that just learning to sometimes let things come to you. I think that I've changed as a teacher over time from feeling like I gotta do everything, stand on my head, to just like, how can I be helpful to you right now? And I think that that's also been sort of the most rewarding, is because we happen to be trained in a field, and it's not the only field, but it happens to be a field that is kind of helpful to people, especially in this moment of loneliness. And so the most rewarding is getting to, we never thought we would have the community that we have, and by community I mean the students, I mean the faculty of 50 plus people, I mean the amazing staff of 7 people, I mean the people sitting in this room who have helped and nurtured us and been there with us as students and supporters and board members for like 30 years, like for all of that time, so many people. And so I guess the most rewarding is like, gosh, we're in each other's lives, and I didn't see that coming. No.
Buzz.
Yeah, top that.
Okay, love that.
You haven't lost all the manic energy, let me just.
I could say almost exactly the same thing, but the thing that came to mind was teaching life stories, for the answer to both as well. Teaching life stories with wounded veterans, all of whom had post-traumatic stress, and actually almost none of whom had visible wounds. What it means to be a wounded warrior is mostly to have post-traumatic stress. And so we talk about how we can, we should have the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes, but that's a big leap for me. I had no experience with the military or anything like that. But I had an experience actually teaching a public speaking class where there was a Marine in the class, and he was moving into the business sector, and he was going to have a team that he had to do a speech to, and so that was the speech that he wanted to work on, and he said, okay, this is what I expect of you. And he did this military thing to his team, and I thought, they're not going to be your team for long. And so the way we typically work as acting teachers is to adjust the given circumstances. So I went up and whispered to him, I said, can you think of a time when you ever made a mistake? And he said, oh yeah. And I said, tell us about that. So I wanted to find the vulnerability in this guy. And he started telling us about a time that he was in charge of a troop, a group of men in a war, and he sent them in too soon and lost 2 guys. And he starts crying. He's just, the tears just pouring down his face as he tells this story. And so whenever somebody starts to cry, usually we say, do you want to keep going? Because it's kind of the worst thing to do is say, you're crying, why don't you go take a minute? Because that's not necessarily what they want or need in that moment, so it's up to them. And he said, no, I want to tell the story. And he told the whole story, just crying the whole way through. And then he went back and spoke to his team, having just done that. And of course, we got to see the real person, and he was so much more effective. And it was just this wonderful moment. And I thought, and I knew that we were starting to do work with veterans, and I wanted to start doing some of this teaching that I never thought I could do before. So I said, yeah, let's have me teach one of these groups with the veterans. And it's the most rewarding because we get to moments like that repeatedly, where people find the ability to tell a story that they didn't know they wanted to tell, or that they didn't know they had the skills to tell. It is very much a skilled-based thing. It's an acting class, but the hardest because they're in such pain, in such difficult places that they can resist the way, I'm used to resistance in acting classes, but the kind of resistance that you get there is just like, no, you're not allowed to ask me these things. You're not allowed to try to take me to these places. So not that we try to get people to tell their worst stories, but we open up things that they don't necessarily want opened up. So there have been some very tough moments as well as those.
So you're trying to get people not to play a part, actually.
Kind of, yeah, which is pretty much true through all of our acting teaching.
Yeah. I do have one last question. Next 30 years, metaverse?
What does that mean?
I think it might have something to do with Facebook, I'm not really sure.
No, it's never going to have anything to do with Facebook. I have anything
Meta
to do with
now means, right?
Yeah, whatever.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to explain the metaverse to you.
Explain the metaverse to us. We have a couple minutes.
It's virtual space, it's 3D, and people don't have legs. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I see us there. Look, not
Briefly.
saying anything that people don't already know, but, theater has been around forever and it will be around forever. And I see Theater Lab more and more. The place where Theater Lab is going is a place of collaboration with other institutions, I think, because I think we've really started to learn that we can do more together than we can in our silos, and we can use our resources to better, all communities. So I know that sounds like a blah, 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 but it's not for us because, most of us kind of work in our own lane in this way, and I see the social justice work being the driving force behind the organization. I know it's I just want to give a shout out to our current board chair, Bert Eiffel, for all the meaningful work that you and our board have been doing with us recently, and I think that's the need. I mean, when we talk about how fractured we are, I just think that we need to understand our shared humanity, and I see this craft, this field, and this organization being able to be a little helpful.
Well, on that note, let's get some questions from the audience. Oh, God. Lisa Dickey.
Uh-oh.
Lisa Dickey.
Oops. Can you guys hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
I can hear you. I'm going to take this off. 2 quick questions.
Stand
First
up.
of all, my name's Lisa Dickey. And my first question, on a scale of 1 to 10, and feel free just to call out a number, how much meaner was Kara tonight than you expected? That's my first question.
10 being like
10 being the worst.
infinitely meaner?
She's so mean.
-3.
Yeah.
Not -10,
Maybe to people who
-3.
don't deserve it. Once again, you're mischaracterizing my
Oh,
skills.
stop, for God's sake. I give you a 10. Okay. So the second question I have, and this is for real, have you ever thought about doing other theater labs in other cities, for example,
Yeah.
Los Angeles or New York or something like that?
We just need the right backer, Lisa Dickey. Honestly, I was born and raised in DC. I love DC. I love this theater community. I've participated in it in many, many different ways, and I see us being an organization with DC roots. The piece that I would like to export a little bit more is the Life Stories model, because I think that there are ways that it can be used in other school systems outside of here, and with other social service organizations. And I think that actually is the most exportable, so that's me.
No, that's me. That's us.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, but thanks, but we'll come out to LA and see you anytime.
Good evening, Jeffrey Slavin. Hi,
Oh, my
Kara.
God.
Hi, Kara. Thank you. So I'm having quite a few deja vus here and thinking back so many incredible experiences with the Theater Lab. But when Buzz was making reference to the documentary and N Street Village, for the benefit of the people that don't really know that story, I mean, that's a pretty extraordinary and one of the big highlights of your 30 years. And also, everybody, don't forget the 30th anniversary is, what's the date?
Oh, we think
event.
that it is going to be November 13th. And that'll be our 30th
Okay,
anniversary.
and I
That
just
way
wanted to give an
benefit.
initial advertisement for it. Hope to see everybody there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
That's
Jeffrey.
Big night of the year.
I
Yeah.
love that Jeffrey Slavin is always selling
Hey,
still.
Jeffrey Slavin is the best. And talk about people who have been there like right from the start.
Yeah, really.
Just right after my parents, you were there. What you're talking about is a documentary that you can see on Amazon. If you haven't already, it's called How I Got Over. And it documents, it's actually the 10-year anniversary of a project and performance that we did with the women of N Street Village, who were formerly homeless and in an addiction recovery program as part of N Street Village's wellness and empowerment program for women. And they basically performed an amazing piece that they wrote and developed and acted in on the Kennedy Center stage in the Terrace Theater for 500 people. It was the absolute highlight of my artistic life, I would say. And I won't spoil it if you want to. So the women are still often come around, and we may be doing some 10th anniversary events if you want to catch some of those things as we come up through the year. But I won't spoil it, but there was a second act to all of it. It was a one-act piece, but what happened after the show was pretty extraordinary. And yeah, we love those women with all our hearts, and we thank all of the people in this room who made it possible for us to do that gigantic project. It was very scary, and people were very. It asked a lot of everybody. So yeah, thanks for asking.
The documentary's on Amazon, How I Got Over.
Great. One last question.
Oh.
I got you. I see you.
Hi, this is a quick question, I think. My name is Sophie Smith. First, thank you so much. It's a joy to hear you both. I think we all feel we've emerged from some sort of chrysalis, and thank you for bringing us out of it. I would like to hear from both of you about what you would ask of us. If you could wave a wand, what would you like us to do? How can we help?
Wow.
Thank you for the question. And I'm waving that wand. Wow. You want to start?
Yeah, you know, we actually talked very briefly about this. You know, we tried, when we teach acting, we try to get the actors to think, what is their objective? What are they trying to do? And so what was our objective in doing this? And it's to give people enough information to want to get more involved, I think, would be my answer to that question. So thank you for your question. And one of the ways, that, like an easy way to get more involved is to come to stuff. We'd love to have you come to stuff. We've got King Lear coming up at the end of this month, which is being done by students and graduates of our honors program, and a faculty member is in it. It's kind of a big 30th anniversary celebration. I hope you'll come and see that. We're doing our first musical in this very space, directed by Deb, Blood Brothers, the week after that. So be around, I guess, is a big answer for me.
And don't be afraid to take a class. Being a student and getting to interact with you in that way is one of our most favorite and important things. Our students are kind of everything to us as a school. And so jump into Anyone Can Act tonight if you want, because we really believe that. And, since you asked, anybody who wants to help me launch the Arts Institute for Creative Advancement, it's a very, very big lift. The thing I didn't say is that even though we're partnered with all of these other amazing organizations and we have all of these resources, we're also committed to paying the participants both for their learning time and the apprenticeship. And so it's a very unusual kind of program. It's the kind of collective impact program that has been shown to be successful in other arenas. And making it possible for people to participate by paying them is really important. It also makes it a very large-scale, costly program. And so if anybody wants to work with me and the city...
What's the cost of that?
It will probably, if it's at full scale, it will be about $400,000 a year. 60% of it goes directly to the participants in it. The pilot year, we're looking for a $200,000 investment, some of which will come from private foundations and some of which will come from some city resources.
So if you had that money, if you had like $1 million, what would you do with it? With that, would you expand that? That's where you would spend your money.
Yes. I mean, I don't know, I didn't ask anybody else. Wait! We need a, but yes, that is. And that is how I'm spending most of my time right now, is working to make that a reality.
Great. Well, on that note, Deb and Buzz, 30 years.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Kara Swisher.
Thank you, Kara Swisher.
We actually really love her. Yay.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Thanks.